The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword introduces us to a brand new villain who now sits, indistinguishably, as the very reason for the beginning of the cyclical nature of the Zelda series. Demise at the very end of the game places a curse on the lands, stating that whenever a Zelda is born, so will an incarnation of his evil, and a hero to fight alongside the paragon of wisdom. It's with his last breath before he is sealed into the Master Sword that this occurs, thus beginning the timeline of the Zelda series. It is also within this game that the idea of a Dark World is explored, but I'll explain a little more on that later on in this video. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the information that we have so far, and answering a question that's come up a few times. Could we see the return of the biggest evil in the land of Hyrule? Could we potentially see the return of Demise in Tears of the Kingdom? The latest trailer, which revealed absolutely loads of new details, showed off a new area for us that could be potentially labelled as underground. These areas, for instance the location where we see the bokoblins mining and where the Link fights a Talus with a magical weapon, appear to not be on the surface. We can see this because stalactites dangle from the ceiling, and as the bokoblin hits the rock in the first shot, the clanging noise appears to echo rather than ring out. This would indicate that we are indoors here rather than outdoors, and therefore we're underground. Down here we have firstly a collection of small blue flames or orbs. We've seen before that these blue flames tend to signify spirits, a ghostly apparition of sorts. They are collected in a small cluster towards the right hand side of the screen, and we could be forgiven for thinking potentially that this is an area where a Poe could be. This definitely looks like down here, in small clusters, we have spirits roaming around, which is our first indicator that this place is obviously more spiritual than we first thought. The odd tree in the background here is also very interesting. It sits dead centre of the shot, though not in the foreground, and it seems to spiral upwards. At no point do we see where this tree reaches up to, but it certainly seems to make it up to the same level as where the stalactites form. What appears to be the trunk of this tree seems to be a giant glowing yellow sack, and at the bottom of all of this sits a pad with a blue hue around it, with 3 roots seeming to prop the tree up, leveraging it to be more than a person high. This reminds me so much of the top of Sheikah Towers, a pad or platform with something above you. I think that these could be points where we get more of the map revealed to us, but something sticks out massively about these. They're not visible on the ground level. We know that these are based solely underground, and in fact, in places in this shot we can actually see 2 of them, but above land and in the sky, we don't see these at all. The closest we get in the sky is the Isle of Trees, as I'm calling it, where a tree seems to have overtaken the entire island from top to bottom. There are none of these weird sacks in the tree though, so I think that these are independent from that island. This could rule them out of being an area where we download more of the map to Link's arm, for instance, as I would expect these to be all over the place. So what are the weird trees? Well, they could have a link back to Skyward Sword, a link to the past and many other games from the series. In the introduction to Skyward Sword, we are told that one dark, fateful day, the earth cracked wide open, and malevolent forces rushed forth from the fissure. This acknowledges that within this trilogy of games, at least, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that the Dark World seems to have some degree of existence. The Dark World or Evil World is a plane of existence that serves as a mirror world, or an alternative world to Hyrule within the Zelda universe. It first made its appearance in A Link to the Past, where Link finds himself transported to the Oddworld after using a teleporter on the floor. He is transformed into a pink bunny, who can do nothing but hop around, but soon you find the magic mirror and are then able to retain your earthly body. This world was once the Sacred Realm, but it had become twisted and warped due to Ganon obtaining the full Triforce and using it to turn the Sacred Realm into this deeply dark mirror world. In Twilight Princess, Ganondorf's plan involves him uniting the Twilight Realm and Hyrule into one, calling it the Dark World. Zant corrupts Hyrule by covering it in twilight, a substance which he created in order to absorb the light in the world. If someone is trapped in the twilight, they become a ghost, unaware that this has happened. The idea of a Dark World is nothing new to the Zelda universe, and these trees could be some form of connection back to this Dark World idea. They may not be points where we download the map for the area, but they could easily be fast travel points for while you're underground. And they could even be points in which the land joins the dark world. These trees could be attempting to reach up to the surface. As we know, trees and plants crave light for photosynthesis. Living underground, these trees appear almost perished with no leaves or bark. And so in order to live, we could see cracks in the ground appear. Perhaps underneath these giant boulders marked for destruction, and trees from below reaching up to the light, acting as a climbing device for Link to get down into the underground world. I mean, we climbed upwards a lot in Breath of the Wild, so is it so hard to imagine us having to climb downwards? So far we have blue flames, spirits, and the trees that seem to grow downwards. But let's take a better look at spirit flames. The spirit flames, as it were, are confirmed by King Rome's existence in Breath of the Wild to be a representation of souls. We do not know if one flame equals one soul, and probably not, as many of these flames surround Rome during his reveal. This could be that one person has died down here, or perhaps converted to a spirit version of themselves, similar to how the Twilight worked in Twilight Princess. But why are we finding them solely down here, and not in the overworld or the sky? Souls, of course, belong to the dead. That's a no-brainer. We have monsters down here, decayed plants and souls. The whole thing is seemingly dead. It feels like a depiction of the land of the dead here, and that would make sense if this is the Dark World. The Dark World was never a pretty place. It was always filled with monsters and death. It was always an area designed to be a polar opposite to a place of thriving life. A dark land devoid of all life. It was always designed to represent the idea of hell in the Zelda universe. And this is why Ganondorf wanted to turn Hyrule into this during his time in Twilight Princess. His plan was to destroy the life of Hyrule, as destroying the life in Hyrule could mean that he could rule. He could only rule in the darkness, which is why he again makes Hyrule an incredibly dangerous place to be indeed in Ocarina of Time. With the inclusion of Ganondorf and Hyrule Castle being lifted towards the sky, we see malice shooting from the floor. This is replicated in several areas, and also up at Death Mountain, which seems to be throwing malice around in the air like it's 1997. This malice is coming from what seems to be a rift in the ground, and the last time we had rifts forming from the floor was, Skyward Sword, just in that little introduction. Skyward Sword openly told us that the ground cracked and malevolent forces came from within. This indicates that this is where the source of all monsters came from within the world, and as such, if monsters or malevolent forces come from this fissure, including the most malevolent of all, Demise, then this world below us must do a few things. It must be a large area. It doesn't necessarily replicate the surface world, but it does need to be large enough to house the entire forces of evil without being overpopulated. So to presume it mirrors the world above, or is an underground version of the world above, would be fair. It also must have a source of food for these creatures to survive. It must have a source of water for these creatures to survive also. And it must have materials for the monsters to forge weaponry. If the area below ground is indeed accessible from the surface, then I would presume that the area is huge. This covers check number 1. Number 2, what grows underground? Mushrooms, fungi, and algae on the walls. Also, if monsters are growing, I suppose we could see larger monsters feed on the smaller monsters also. Water we haven't seen so far, but we can presume there will be small lakes underground, though I don't think we can confirm this. And materials for weaponry? Well, we literally see a bokoblin mining for something. Could it be ores to make weaponry from? In all honesty, this place underground is looking more and more like it could be the new rendition of the Dark World. If this is the case, then Link just needs a way in and out. And the trees with the weird sacks could be just that. We could teleport in using these perhaps, or simpler still, as I stated earlier, Link could just be forced to climb down the plant itself. This would give him his way in and out, and finally a way to get to the root of all evil. The analogy of roots is used in various locations in the trailer, most notably on this island, where we climb a giant root in order to get to the top of one of the Skylands. This could well be not just a location in the game, but a metaphor. Link finding his way to the root of all evil, so to speak. The root of all evil, of course, is Demise. I alluded to this before in another video, but we know for sure that Demise is the reason for the cyclical curse of good, evil, and everything in between. I made it clear that I'm sure that we have two different Links, one with a slightly more feral styling, long hair flowing and a more rudimentary style and seemingly no Zonai arm, though it's still been burned by the malice that seems to attack him. This Link, I am sure, is set before the current time period of Tears of the Kingdom, despite many of you in the comments not agreeing. This area seems to have more greenery. It has monsters back to their original, non-malice riddled appearances, and monsters seem more harmonious in direct contrast to those monsters who have been impacted by malice and seem almost rabid. This area feels different to the areas that we've seen with our ponytailed, newer version of Link, almost more idyllic. So far we have a deep underground structure, possibly a dark world, with possible links to death and destruction. It has plenty of resources for monsters to grow and thrive. We also have a possible entry point. And we also have potentially two versions of Link running around, one in the past, even as possibly as far back as the time of Hylia's chosen hero. All of this is adding up quite nicely and suggesting that we may well get a revival of the greatest evil the world of Hyrule has ever seen. But there is just one thing that sways me even more into thinking that this could well be the case. The three most recent Zelda titles are Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, seeing as we have Sky Islands, which were first seen inside of Skyward Sword, we all of a sudden have a tenuous but possible link between Tears of the Kingdom and Skyward Sword. But it's just that, it's tenuous. So to back this link up within the Sky Islands, we also have a very short shot of an island that ties us back to the map of Skyward Sword. During this shot, if you slow things down enough, you can see to the right here, there is an island with a lone tree, and what seems to be a collective of gravestones. This island is oddly familiar. We've seen it before, in Skyloft just before we meet Batro. This area belongs to Skyloft, and if this area exists in the game, it means potentially Skyloft exists within the realms of Tears of the Kingdom, and it could even potentially mean that this shot and this island that Link runs out to in the trailer could well be what is actually left of Skyloft. If this link is established and we're able to visit the remains of Skyloft, and this game is therefore the third part of the trilogy, then this trilogy would be all about the Master Sword. The Master Sword was formed in Skyward Sword. It was used to seal Demise and become the true blade of Evil's Bane. In Breath of the Wild, Zelda tells us that whether skybound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight, the Master Sword will always be bound to the hero of Hyrule, a nice nod back to three of the major 3D titles in the series. After Zelda rescues Link during Zelda's third forgotten memory, Resolve and Grief, Zelda literally asks Link if he can hear the Master Sword speaking out to him, and in the 17th memory, the sword physically speaks out to her. It glows a mythical blue colour, telling her to put Link into status for 100 years, and put the sword back in its legendary pedestal inside of the forest. This is 100% a solid link back to Skyward Sword, and in that particular title, Link's sword literally talks to him via a spirit that resides within the blade, Fi. Later on in Skyward Sword, the hero defeats Demise and seals him, also inside of the Master Sword. Demise and Fi's spirits now sit within the blade. With this information, let's look at the blade in Tears of the Kingdom, and that legendary blade is clearly ruined. Even the logo of the game indicates that it is broken and will need to be repaired via Zonai magic, and that is shown quite clearly in this shot, where Link is holding the Master Sword outright, and although it has a blue glow, it's definitely in terrible shape. It appears corroded, like an acid has attacked it. It's not just broken, but dissolved and melted in various places. If we follow good old-fashioned video game logic, we have two spirits inside of a vessel that is now effectively broken. We see the sword still imbued with the blue light signifying Fi, but what of the malice that we would see from Demise? We seem to have all but forgotten that he is sat somewhere in the sword also, and presuming that this is the same Master Sword as the one from Skyward Sword, we must be indeed looking at a trilogy of games that tells the story of the sword. His spirit was sealed away. He was not killed. In fact, you could argue that the cycle actually continues because his spirit is sealed inside of the Master Sword. As long as it exists, Demise can exact the curse he sets, making sure every time a Zelda is born, so is a resurrection of his evil. This sword being broken could mean that the cycle is ending. No Demise in the sword equals no curse. But in that case, surely the spirit of Demise doesn't just disappear or is overwhelmed by Fi. I mean, this sky is the embodiment of evil, so it must go somewhere. So what if, in the sword being broken, its seal is also broken? Fee chooses to stay to help the hero, but Demise is released from the sword of evil's bane. Demise is released, and with it comes a second threat of pure evil. Demise is released, and this is what causes the reanimation of Ganondorf. The evil spirit fuses with his long deceased body and causes his eyes to snap open, the hatred spewing out of them as the power flows through him due to the Zonite arm that clamps him in place but feeds him power simultaneously. That would mean that the game's conclusion is not just in defeating Ganondorf again, but the purest of evils. It would take everything in Link's arsenal to defeat him, including travelling back to the past to learn not only of his mistakes in the past, but how to seal the evil for once and for all, or even possibly to bring the Tears of the Kingdom back to Hyrule, long lost to the skies of thousands of years ago, in order to resurrect or rebuild the Master Sword better than it ever was before. I'm almost doubtless now, after doing my research and seeing everything in front of me, that not only will we see a return of Fee, but Demise is due to make a comeback also. And this evil entity that awakens underneath Hyrule Castle is indeed Ganondorf, but not as we know him. His evil is remanifested due to the Demise's spirit literally entering his decaying body. If this happens, it means that the threat is tenfold of what we've had before. I remember that threat saw the world nearly destroyed by Guardians and the Divine Beasts, purely because of the malice exuded by Calamity Ganon, which is an apparition of Ganondorf, was strong enough to overtake them all in their entirety. This Hyrule is in trouble. And not just Hyrule, but all of her allies too. This Ganondorf is more driven, and with his power over the moon and malice, is potentially the most dangerous we've ever seen. And that level of hatred, that amount of disdain towards the world, and the level of magic that is involved, literally just to shoot malice out of the moon, could only come from one place. A being whose life is literally served with hatred and malice. The one who would destroy not just Hyrule but the entire world, should there be no one to stop him at all times in the hero. Demise. I'm not saying that Demise is the main antagonist here. I can't see this husk being him, but I think his spirit has imbued itself into the Gerudo King of Evil, similar to how Ganondorf puppeteers Zant in Twilight Princess. His power, considering that he's been dead for thousands of years, comes from somewhere, and that broken sword that Link is staring at is a massive tell when it comes to the possibility that Demise is once again wreaking havoc on the world. Guys, thank you so much for watching. This Zelda community is growing so quickly, and it's genuinely amazing to see all of the comment sections come to life with every video. Please leave your comment down below with your thoughts on this potential idea or any other theories that you guys may have, and you never know, it could end up being a hot topic on this channel very soon. We've grown at an incredibly unexpected rate, and we're pushing now towards 1,000 subscribers by May the 12th. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel and turn the notification bell on so you can keep up with the latest Legend of Zelda theories. Thank you all. Bye!